Welcome to the Larry Rinker Golf Podcast, your place for tour-proven conversations, world-class instruction, and real results. I'm your host, Larry Rinker. My guest today is a top teacher, a top club fitter, the director of instruction at Chafuncta Country Club in Covington, Louisiana. He's an expert in launch monitor and 3D technology and has been featured speaker at hundreds of educational conferences for golf professionals all over the world. Please welcome my good friend James Leitz to the show. James, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Larry. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. James, you're the gadget guy. You got more things in that office you're sitting in than I think anybody has in the country. I mean, you got TrackMan, you got gears, you got Kistler force plates, you've got cameras. Oh boy, I'm probably not naming everything. To me, you're like Q. I'm James Bond and you're Q, and you're coming up with all these cool things, and you've really helped me through the years with learning how to use a launch monitor and just so many different things. You go all over the country teaching people how to use launch monitors. Why does the ball go where it goes and all these different things. So to me, it's just pretty cool. And this golf studio that you have now, I mean, it's pretty amazing. And so, I just think it's great what you've done. You really helped the teaching community a lot with your science and research by using all these cool products.
Well, I've been very blessed. It goes back to, you like I, like many listening to this podcast, we have a passion for this game. And I tell people all you need is time and passion. And it's an amazing thing in the grace of God, obviously. But time and passion will get you to a pretty cool place because it's just this pursuit of understanding or trying to be better at something. As a player, I diverted. I mean, you continue to become a successful tour player. I wanted that same path. I played Division I college golf at McNeese State. I wanted to be a tour player, but I wasn't even close to being good enough. So, but I was always a tinkerer of swings, helping everybody I could help back even then, even though I didn't know what I was talking about. I had this passion of wanting to just be better. And it was very humbling to not get to that level, to go through college and not play, and not even try to play professionally per se, even mini tours, because I knew I wasn't good enough. So then I said, well, I wanted to work in golf. I don't care if it was cleaning toilets at a golf course. I wanted to be in golf. So I was very lucky. 1 month out of college, a golf course I had worked at for 7 years in high school and college, Pinewood Country Club in Slidell. They had let go of my former boss, and they were interviewing for the pro job, and I had my degree. I was a pretty good player, and they knew I would work my tail off. Lo and behold, at 22 years old, I was a head golf professional,
Wow.
and
Wow.
never spent a day as an assistant. Had to learn on the fly, but I had such a work ethic that it helped make up for my lack of inexperience, in my inexperience. So, 1 week after starting working there, I was teaching an engineer, because I was a good player. He says, "Oh, well, the new pro can help me." And he was about an 8 or 9 handicap, and Mr. Ray Lacombe, and he's hitting shots. And I said, "Mr. Ray, I want you to do something different at the top of your backswing." And he goes, "Why?" Like an engineer is going to test you. Why? And I said, "Well, because I do it," which is the most stupid thing you can tell somebody. And anyway, he goes, "Well, how do you know if I do it right?" I said, "Well, I got my eyes, Mr. Ray." He goes, "James." He shook his head and he said, what's now one of the most famous phrases in all of golf: never guess what you can measure. He told me that in 1982. I tell people I made that phrase famous, but he's the one who created it, Mr. Ray Lacombe, who's buried in Arlington Cemetery, by the way, a war hero.
Wow.
Um,
I said that the other day to someone.
yeah, and
We were
so
talking about things, and I said, "Hey, why guess at what you can measure?" James, gotta say, congrats on being elected to the Gulf States PGA Hall of Fame in
about that,
2022. That's quite an honor.
well,
That
it is because people don't realize, everybody knows me as a teacher, but I was a head golf professional for 40 years and director and actually golf professional and golf course superintendent at Pinewood for 33 of them. And I did all of this while I was still doing all of that. I never met an 80-hour week I didn't like. I mean, I literally never worked under 70 hours a week for 40 years. And,
Wow.
people say, man, you've come a long way. I said, it's amazing what 40 years of 80-hour weeks can do for your career. And,
Yeah.
but you learn a lot.
So, James, we call them the new ball flight laws. What are the parameters that affect where the ball goes?
Well, start off with nothing's new in physics and geometry. The question is how we explain them and so forth. And I got to give Dr. Gary Warren credit. People criticize him sometimes, and that frustrates me because he had it almost perfectly correct. And it's kind of like Homer Kelly. Sometimes he gets criticism, and I go, what did he have to measure with? Nothing. What Homer Kelly figured out in the golfing machine was amazing. What Gary Warren put out in the first, that we called them the ball flight laws, I would have termed them different. To me, the ball flight laws are the laws the ball flies once it's in the air. The impact alignments are what creates the ball flight. So I talk about impact alignments and not ball flight laws. So the four things that tell a golf ball what to do are the speed of the club, the path of the club, both vertical path, which we call angle of attack, and directional path, which we call path. Really, they're one because the club's only moving in one direction at any one given time. So it's measured between the horizon and the flagstick. So that's the path, the direction of force. That's number two. Number three is the face of the club, where it's pointing when it hits the ball. And the last is impact point, that when the ball hits anywhere but in the center of mass, the club twists and introduces the gear effect. That's the four things that tell a golf ball what to do. So as a teacher and a student, the first thing you have to go back to is say, what caused that ball to go where it did? And then I tell people all the time, my students, I educate on occurrences, but I only change on patterns. So when you're hitting golf shots and when you see an occurrence, don't start changing until you see a pattern. And when you see a pattern, then you change. Because you know why? We're all varying human beings. God did not give out lack of variance equally. Not even on the PGA Tour. You played on the PGA Tour, and there were some guys that hit the ball in the center of the face every time, and the ball, they couldn't chip or putt, or they were mental crazy people, or whatever it may be. That was not equally given out. Brad Faxon was not as good a ball striker as Justin Rose. So, but he did pretty damn good. So
Yep.
it's really interesting to me. I keep going back through that. And the most underappreciated of the four is impact point. And that's so when I'm looking at a golf shot, person hitting a ball, I'm not even looking at the golfer. I'm looking at the ball. And I see the blur of the club. I can't see the club exactly at the ball, but I can see the direction of the blur. I can see the blur in relation to the ball. I can watch the initial direction. I can hear the sound, and I could watch the club's interaction with the turf, and I can tell you what happened. Because the first thing I want to know is how the impact point affected that one golf shot. Because we could sit there with a robot all day long that never changes the swing and move the ball around, and the ball will do all kinds of different things. So to me, as a teacher and as a student, it's the first place you got to go. A student should never go into a lesson and not be able to tell their pro where the ball's been hitting on the face. Most people don't even know.
Yeah. Yeah, and what we feel is solid might not be quite center of the face, too. I remember when you were teaching me how to use launch monitors, and you said, now, Larry, club face is king. That kind of is going to determine the start direction more than anything. But a close second is where you hit it in the club face. And I went, yeah, right, James. And then I remember I was out at Red Sky, and some guy hit a ball that should have been about 10 yards offline, and it was 40 yards offline. I went, okay, James, I'm a believer now.
A funny story, and I quote this story about you one time. We were sitting here talking. I don't know if it was on the podcast or whatever. And you said when I started talking about impact point being so important, you said James, when I was on tour, when a bunch of us would get around and talk about golf swing, we never talked about impact point. And I said, yeah, Larry, because the guys with impact point problems weren't in the room. They got cold. They were out. The only ones left were the ones who had good impact points. So
It's a
it's kind of
God-given
funny.
talent, James.
No, I mean, some of it is. And look, I tell people all the time, I can tell somebody if they come to me as a college player, if they want to play golf for a living, within 2 minutes, I could tell you if they're who's definitely not going to make it. I'm not going to tell you who's not going to make it, but I can give you a small percentage where I'll tell you he's not going to make it. And the two criteria are enough speed to play at the level they want to compete in. So if you've got a guy with 105 miles an hour club head speed, you're not playing on a PGA Tour. Not happening. Not today's world. Okay. Number two, a roaming impact point. Notice I said roaming, and I didn't say perfect. When Tommy Moore, remember Tommy Moore, my dear friend, our dear
Yes.
friend, when he hit a ball, every ball was about a quarter to 3/8 of an inch in the heel, but it was the same every time. So he didn't have a perfect impact point, but he had a non-roaming impact point. But when it roams around, you better go sell insurance and go play in the great amateur tournaments because week in and week out, you're not going to play golf for a living if that ball's going all over the club face, no matter how consistent you're swinging.
Yeah, I love showing that to my students. I remember I had a husband and wife a few weeks ago, and I showed the wife, and she was a 30 handicapper, but I showed her a driver and she hit it all over the face, and she went, okay, I understand. So, James, you've done some videos on how important it is when you video yourself to get the camera lens on plane. I just got the new iPhone
Wow.
17 Pro. It shoots 240 frames per second in 4K. But so many times people just stand behind the person hitting and they don't realize where they need the camera lens so it will accurately show if somebody's on plane or not.
Well, that's very important, and I've got to give credit all the way back to at Grand Cypress. This is going back to the early '90s. Um, Doctor, come on, you're going to remember that
Man,
Dr. Mann was there along with
Fred
who was
Griffin.
yeah, exactly, and they had two cameras, one down the line, one face on, and they were in little tents, and they were only about 3 feet off the ground. And I was teaching a lot by then, but then I asked them, I said, why do you put it here so it doesn't distort? And they talked a lot about distortion. And if you're going to actually measure something off of a camera, it has to be kind of halfway top to bottom of what you're trying to, because of the parallax. If you look at a video and the floor is curved on the video screen, so it's you sitting there drawing lines to see precision, and really it's not the best thing to use. The second thing was with the club has to be on plane. So what does the camera being on plane mean? So let's say you're standing with a camera and you're looking at the roof of your house and you can see the shingles. You keep moving until you can't see the shingle color. Now you're on plane. Okay. So in golf, you can actually sit there. I take a hula hoop and put it on an angle and lean it against something, and I keep moving until no longer see a circle. Or you could I've got a foam wedge that's on an angle. I put it and point it to the target line, and I move until I no longer can see the color of the front of that plane. So if it's a board, let's say the outside's red and the inside's blue, if you move too far, you see the blue side. If you move the other way, you see so you want to move to where that is. So think about this for a second. If you want to have the camera on the target line, the camera needs to be on the ground.
Right.
If you're going to stand up and video yourself or somebody videoing somebody, depending how tall they are, you might have to stand behind their heels. So if you've got a real short girl and a real tall guy filming her, he might be 2 feet behind her heels. But if you've got a real tall guy and a real short person filming them, they might be on the ankle line. So you have to catch the sweet spot on the downswing plane. That's where you
Right.
should. And then the only thing you can tell with that video, with all the numbers on TrackMan, is swing direction. You cannot tell path because path and swing direction is the direction of the entire circle of the club sweet spot coming down. The path is where it is at the moment you hit the ball because it's ever changing. The path of the club is ever changing. Every shot has an inside out path, a straight path, and a left path because it's on a circle. It's on a tilted circle. So you got to find out where zero is on your circle if you want to hit it straight. Well, that might not be usable. It might be behind your right foot if you're over the top.
Right.
So where you place the camera, if you're going to use a camera, has to be very well. I think you're safe in telling the golfer if they're going to stand up and kind of hold the club in their arms, in their hands like a barbell, the camera should shoot right through the shaft. That's pretty safe down the line. So that's about 2.5, 3 feet off the ground.
I put it through their hands, and
Perfect.
I and then I'm back where I'm right on the hands, which is almost the toe line, just out from the toe line.
Absolutely. I
So
like
it's
that.
that high off the ground, and then that's how far off of the target line or the ball it is towards the body. But it's really important because you did a video where you had three cameras and one swing, and you showed how that affects where the camera is. And you can have somebody look over the top, you can have somebody look on plane, you can have somebody look under the plane simply because of where you place the camera. So it's so important. So many people now are videoing themselves. They've got sticks. They can, a lot of people are looking at their swings now, but if you don't get that camera right, you're not going to really see if you're on plane or not. James, you mentioned something, swing direction, horizontal swing direction. That was something I had a hard time getting my arms around, and it's something that, we don't talk a lot about. I don't talk a lot about it in my golf lessons, but I finally came to the realization that horizontal swing plane is measured at low point. So if you're hitting an iron and your low point's 4 inches in front of the ball, it's measuring there. And so if it's measuring in front of the ball, that number will be left of what it's measuring path at impact. And I remember we did a fantasy golf camp for Graham McDowell a few years ago. And on his TrackMan, he had two numbers. He had his horizontal swing direction and how far he was hitting it. And the way he used it was he knew if his horizontal swing direction was to the right, he was swinging to end to out. And that's the one thing that he did. And he was a lot like your friend Tommy Moore, where he hit almost every shot slide heel and drew the ball. And it's kind of funny when people draw the ball, they tend to hit it toward the heel, and people that fade it tend to hit it slight toe. It just works out that way for good players, doesn't it?
No, absolutely. So what I think a simple way of explaining horizontal swing plane. What start off with launch monitors, what are we measuring? We're measuring the sweet spot travel of a golf club. Okay? So TrackMan's measuring this blob of a club head and it's finding its center and it's tracing it on the downswing. This is a downswing measurement. So imagine the downswing little red dot in the middle of your club head is making a streak in the sky. That's a hula hoop. So the hula hoop, the direction of the hula hoop is at low point. We're going to measure it. So if you throw a hula hoop on a roof and it slides down and hits the gutter, the hula hoop is the sweet spot travel. The plane is the shingles, and the gutter direction is the horizontal swing plane direction, or they call it swing plane. I want them to call it plane direction with TrackMan. I said, call it plane direction, P-A-L-A-N-E direction, which is the gutter of the roof. That's not path direction. That's the direction of the entire plane. Well, what creates the plane? Sweet spot travel on the downswing. Now, the golf swing's not perfectly planar. In other words, it's not perfectly flat.
Right.
It's got a little kind of a curvature to it, and but let me tell you what. It only matters from here to here, so it's not like we got to look at this thing. Well, yeah, that thing's not a perfect flat. Well, it only has to be from here to here. It's still a direction during the impact interval, and that's the only time the golf ball cares. But if you're going to get a golf club to do the right thing, once you get speed in it, you better be on the right plane. So what I tell people all the time is I will draw, my favorite line to draw in teaching is the impact shaft plane. When the camera's in a good place down the line, I'll draw the shaft plane at impact, draw it up, and then I'll back the swing up. Then when the club's coming down, I will look at the club sweet spot. Once you get speed in it, if it's coming from under the plane or over the plane, it's going to be on the plane at impact.
Has to.
Okay? Yeah, because that's where I created it. But the question is, if it's coming under it, post-impact, it's going to be over it. If it's over the plane, post-impact, it's going to be under it. So that's out to in to out, whatever you call it.
Right.
And I think that when you're trying to fix someone's swing, regardless of the methodology, once that club gets speed in it, it better be on that plane. It doesn't have to be on the plane the whole time, because I tell people that downswing shaft plane is like a runway with ice on it. That plane better be lined up to that runway once it gets momentum, or you're only going to what? Cross the runway.
Right.
That's golf. But if we get the club on the downswing, if it's a shift, I got no problem with that. It's kind of like when they line the plane up to take off. They line it up and then they thrust it. But you got to get the. But if you got thrust and you got speed in that club head and it's off plane, that's also what causes something called the shank. The shank is an off-plane motion.
Yeah.
So if you hit a shank and you video it, draw a line right up under the shaft plane where it should be, and then start looking back. Where's my club getting off that plane?
Right.
Where because if it's above it, that hosel has to get back to that line, or you're going to shank it. What? So don't get it above the line. Teach them to move the golf club in such a way that the club gets more lawful. Because it's the old saying: if you're not lawful, you will be awful. Physics never takes a day off.
James, it's interesting. Mac O'Grady's P6 shaft parallel to the ground coming into the ball. I really believe great players, and you see Jim Furyk do it with his swing. They get that club head on plane before that shaft gets parallel to the ground.
Oh,
they get it on. Look. They get it on plane about when it's at their right ear as
Absolutely.
They're coming down if they're right-handed.
It comes back to my plane on an ice runway theory. You know, Jim Furyk is up here, but his first move is a shift and then his speed in it. He's not shifting it. He's not thinking of it that way, but he's getting it down. You know, I bet you Jim Furyk's clubs are 2 degrees flat. He's up here. But the shifts are okay. They're not against the laws. The only laws are at impact. Everything else is optional, by the way. There's only 4 laws, and they're all at impact. Everything else is optional. Now they become less and less optional the closer you get to impact. Because once that club gets speed in, I believe it's swinging you. You ain't swinging it.
Well, you've been on this road to 4/10,000ths of a second for a long time. That's how long impact takes.
That's it. If you shoot 80, that's 320 10,000ths. So 1/30th 1 second determine your whole score. You're out there for 4.5 hours, but only a 30th of a second determined it.
So we talk about degrees now. You know, I'll tell somebody, hey, you're swinging 5 degrees left. I believe the math is 7.8 feet is 1 degree at 150 yards, basically about 10 feet at 200 yards. Is that correct?
Yeah, my rounding off, I have a 50-yard pole from my building because we hit a lot of wedges 50 yards. Because I believe when you're working on that 50-yard shot, there's a lot of commonalities, even though it be shorter, but halfway down and halfway through are pretty mechanically the same as a full swing. So anyway, I tell people about 3 feet at the 50 yards is a degree. So yes, you go 300 yards. That's times 6, so it's 18 feet per degree. So if all of a sudden the guy's 5 in the out, that's 90 feet to the right. That's 30 yards. How many 60-yard wide fairways you play?
Zero.
Okay, that's usually a condo or a house or a street somewhere. So that's why I don't let people play with those paths. I call it a adverse path. Can you hit a ball that winds up at the target? Absolutely. I can make a free throw over the back of my head. That's not the way to do it.
So James, you do a lot of schools all over the world, really, and you kind of run people through a formula that if you give them two numbers, they should be able to know what the third parameter number is. And I've always, when I get into that with you, I always wonder, okay, what is he calculating, and why is that important to understand that? So, what are three things that you do that with when you do your seminars?
Well, for starters, when you were talking about where I put the tiles on TrackMan, uh, I tell a story. My tiles are in an order where I can look. I know where they are, and when you reset TrackMan, they all go back to their normal place, and it drives me nuts because I got to move them back around. And there's three. There's actually four or five numbers that are all together in an order. You've got the swing plane, which is the angle of the roof, followed by the angle of attack, followed by the swing direction, followed by the path, followed by the launch direction, followed by the face. So people rewind that and write that down, because the first three determine the path. The angle of the plane, the direction of the plane, and the angle of attack create path. So in Louisiana, with our gumbo, how is the gumbo made? Well, everybody looks at path. You talked about, a guy only had two numbers on the screen. A lot of people, when they first started with TrackMan, the deal was just put path on the screen, face on the screen. Well, you got to know how the path is created. How is the gumbo created? What are the ingredients of the path? And there are only three. Plane angle, plane direction, and angle of attack is what creates path. So if you want to change your path, you got to change one of those three, or all three, or a combination of each other. So I think that, when I first started doing that, I had I call it name that path. And in 2009, when TrackMan had their very first users conference, we had about 75 people there. And I wasn't supposed to speak. I was there as a TrackMan owner, just like the other 75, although I knew how to teach with it. And so Justin Pageant was one of the national guys for TrackMan, and he told Frederick, he says, Frederick, you need to let James Leitz speak to the group because he knows how to teach with this thing. And Frederick goes, no way is anybody speaking at the first TrackMan summit that's not a TrackMan employee. And Justin says, you need to listen to what he has to say. This is 2009. I'd already had my TrackMan for almost 3 years. So he says, okay, I'll meet him in the lobby. So we met in the lobby, and I was showing Frederick what I was doing. I wasn't a minute into it. He says, 4 o'clock today. And I spoke at every TrackMan summit for the next 4 years, no matter where they were in the world. But it really comes down to understanding that. How is the path? So really, I just said speed, path, face, and impact point to the 4 laws. Speed is speed, but how is the path created? And like, for instance, if you say, oh, I got a 2-degree inside-out path with my 7-iron, that's perfect. What if you got no angle of attack? Is that a very usable 2-degree path?
No.
Not unless it's on a tee. So the point I'm trying to make is, so the first thing I do when I'm looking at a golf swing, after looking at the impact point, I'm going to look, is the angle of attack what I want? Is it usable? You got guys coming to you, hitting 4 up. Everybody's trying to hit up on the driver, and they're trying to draw it. So they have to have a swing direction so far to the right to bottom out before the ball. And yeah, they could hit their driver. They're 5 in the out, hitting up on it 4, and their swing direction has to be like 10 to the right. And I start chuckling. I said, after I see him hit the driver, by the way, every lesson I have, they hit about half a dozen 7-irons, a half a dozen drivers before I open my mouth. And I'll go, hit me a 3-wood off the ground. They'll either say, A, I don't have a 3-wood, B, I hate my 3-wood, or C, they do what I call change their spots without knowing it. Because if they're swung their 3-wood, anything like their driver, they'll drop kick it or top it or hit it so far in the heel or hit the biggest push draw ever, or they can't hit it off the ground. So
It's
really,
funny.
go
It's
ahead.
funny you say that because when I came to see you and you gave me a personal how to use TrackMan launch monitors, I'm with FlightScope now. You know, they're 2 and Foresight. They're really the 3 we see on tour today. But I remember I was hitting drivers and you sat back there in your New Orleans accent. Can't do that with the 3-wood rinker. And I picked my 3-wood out and I didn't realize, but I changed my spots. I got up there and for the first time ever, I realized I set up totally different to my 3-wood than my driver. It was so instinctive for me.
Because you're a player. Guess what you also did? In the 70s and early 80s, and early, maybe late 80s, when you were hitting metal woods and little small wooden heads, when you hit it off the ground, what was one of the main reasons we didn't want to hit it? We wanted to hit a driver off the ground. Number one, we had to hit it far, but we knew we wouldn't what?
It left.
We wouldn't hook it. Because if you
Right,
got way under, you drop kick it. So that's
right.
changing your spots. So when a guy goes, I love my 3-wood, then I realize he changes his spots. And if they change his spots, all's forgiven. Okay? But if he doesn't, we could fix why they can't hit their 3-wood off the ground. And that's a huge, for a good player that can't do that, they go, I hit my 3-wood off the tee, I don't ever hit it off the ground. Yeah, because the geometry on your 3-wood is too much like, and that's any club. We're going to go straight from a driver with a 10-degree right swing direction, hitting up on it 4, and now we got to hit an 8-iron off the ground. And it's like, you could do it, but you got to know where you are. If you know where
Right.
you are and you can do it well, I got no problem with that. But most people can't change. They can't change their spots.
Well, that's why we see so many people that they say, I'm hitting my driver great, but I can't hit my 3 or 5-wood off the ground, or they can't get a 4-iron in the air. And so you and I know exactly what that is. To me, I just look at it as where's your weight with the driver. I mean, I'm hitting up 7 and 9 these days. And where's my weight? I'm back. I'm back on my back foot, hitting up and swinging out. But when I change to hit something off the ground, I better get my weight more in my front foot and get my shoulders more level so I can make that angle of attack more down. And I just learned something from you. I got to get that pass straighter too.
Well, again, as long as you could change your spots. A lot of high school age kids and even some college players that come to me, one of the first questions I ask them is, what shot shape do you want with your irons and what shot shape do you want with your woods? Where's your miss? And do you try to work the ball when you play? Both ways. I ask those questions of good players all the time. And the reason is most people are not qualified to truly play competitive golf, working the ball all over. Yeah, they can make it curve left and curve right, but can they make it finish at the target? After they just hit a draw, now they're going to hit a fade, and they're both going to go finish right at the target. If they could do that, they're damn near unicorns.
Right.
Okay? I
Yeah,
asked Scott Fawcett one time, I said,
I get a kick out of people, James, that show up and they want to hit it left and they want to cut it and draw it, but yet they don't have one shot they can control yet.
how many people come to you that they say that? Because the first thing I'm going to do is test them. Okay, your stock shot's a draw, and I hit me a cut. The first one out the box, their first cut out the box is one of two things. It's either a way left path or it's still a right path. It's like, I go, you can't do it. I said, that's like asking Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to shoot a fallback jumper and Dirk Nowitzki to do a sky hook. Do what you can do until you can't use it.
Right.
I
And
remember Foley telling Hunter Mahan one time, he says, Hunter, you draw the ball unless there's a tree in the way. Great advice.
Yeah, great advice. I remember, a lot of players, one-dimensional. Jim Gallagher Jr. Some people could say Jack Nicklaus, Bob Estes, who's playing on the Champions Tour. I nicknamed him Robo Pro because he just hit the same shot all the time. It was a little fade. Bruce Litsky said my draw fades 2 yards. So we've had a lot of one-dimensional guys that are really good. I remember when I was working on hitting the ball straight and fading it a little bit and eliminating the left side of the golf course. And I asked Gary Koch about it. I go, what do I do if I got a back left hole location and the wind's blowing left to right? He said, Larry, you just hit it 30 or 40 feet right of the hole, two putt, make your par. You're going to have plenty of flag sticks you can go after in the round. So that's just good advice. You got to find out what you're good at and what you're not as good at. It's not always hit the shot that's appropriate for the situation. Sometimes you got to go with your stock shot.
Well, especially when it's on an iron shot to a green that might have more tighter problems.
Right.
It's one thing to have a 50-yard wide fairway and you could swoop it this way or do that way. I got no problem with all that. But
Yeah.
when the target gets really small, when you got to finish it, because you know we get outside of 30 feet, we average more than two putts. So whether we're 30 or 50, it's like we start getting into where we're not averaging under two putts. So I think that
Maybe you're not, James.
well, I can't play anymore, unfortunately. But you know, I just think that people have. But then again, when I teach players to practice, good players to practice, I do want them to keep their path honest. I want them to hit the ball both ways when they practice. I want them to
Right.
do it when they have to. They get behind a tree, they got to curve the damn ball. They got a lake left of the green, and you're in the right rough and cut it. You better be able to curve the ball. But also, too, from a feel perspective, think about it. Ben Hogan and Tiger Woods both did the same thing. When they practiced, they hit the balls through windows and made the ball do different things.
Right.
I love that practice.
Yo, it's great practice if you can do it.
No, no, but
I
no,
had a gentleman a couple of weeks ago came in to see me for 4 days, and he's hitting it and he's talking about the style of his swing and all this stuff. And I finally just got a little amped up, passion kicking in. I said, all right, see that pole out there 60 yards away? I want you to take your pitching wedge and hit it just to that pole, and I want to see the ball curve right to left. And he did it. And I said, okay, I want to see you hit it at that pole, make the ball curve left to right. And he did it. And I looked at him and I said, in that moment, you just taught me you got talent.
yeah,
Because if you couldn't have done that, then you're not
we're,
that good.
we're not
This
going
guy
down that
wants to be a
road.
good player. This guy wants to chase, high level amateur golf. So when I saw that, I'm like, okay, I got something I can work with now. But it was interesting how I got him out of his box and just said, okay, hit me some shots. And he was able to do it. So, James, you've done a lot of work. D-plane is something that golf instructors, some players talk about. We have the D-plane, 4 parameters to that D-plane, and we see a ball fly. We can measure on our launch monitors where the ball goes, but we have a normalized that shows us where the ball would have gone if we hit it in the center of the face, and sometimes that's pretty different. But what are the 4 things that make up the D plane, and what do you think the importance of each parameter is?
Well, in my mind, there's really only three. You've got the force direction, the face direction, and the ball direction, and they're supposed to be on the same plane. So as you well know, flight scope and TrackMan are not measuring the true face. So they're measuring the direction of the path, which is measured. They're measuring the direction that the ball takes off, which is measured. And then on that same plane, here's the face. Okay, path, ball, face. Okay, so direction of the force and the direction of the face. The ball launch is between those two, and it's closer to the face than it is the path, which the path is vertical path and horizontal path. This bottom finger is the path. I tell you a funny story. In 1983, when I was at PGA Business School, I was a young apprentice, and there's 250 pros and apprentices in this room in Dallas, Texas. And the guy teaching this golf swing back then, as you well know, they said the ball starts on the path and curves to the face. And I'm thinking to myself, read the book, Search for the Perfect Swing?
I haven't, but I know the book.
Got to get it because there's a graphic in there that shows the path, the face, and where the ball starts, and that the line for where the ball starts was much closer to the face than the path. And it was written by engineers in 1968 or 9. Okay, so I raised my hand, and everybody's looking at me, and I said, "So you're saying the ball starts on the path?" He goes, "Well, yes." I said, "Well, with an iron, do you hit down on the ball?" He goes, "Well, of course." I said, "Well, is it hitting down a path, a vertical path?" And he goes, "Well, yeah." I said, "Then why don't the ball start underground and come up?" And he looked at me and he goes, "I think you're right." He said, "But don't answer it on the test that way." Because that's the path. The path is down. If the ball started on the path, it'd go into the ground.
And we
That's
call
the
that
simple.
angle of attack.
Yeah, we half an angle of attack are really measuring the force of the club in relation to the horizon in relation to a vertical target. They're only one direction of force, and the D plane is the direction of the force and the direction of the face. That's the D plane.
That's
Two
it.
lines that intersect create a plane. Period.
Yep.
That's it. That's the D plane. The ball launches in the middle of those two.
So I had a conversation with a tour player several years ago, and he believed that his lead wrist stayed flat past impact to the top of his swing.
Maybe it did, but okay, I got a story for that. In 2006, there was about a half a dozen of us guys who were golf machine knowledgeable guys. Some way more knowledgeable than me on the whole book. I tell people with the golf machine book, you either know all of it or none of it because it's so interrelated, and I'm not that smart. Chapter 2 made the most sense to me because it was basically how the club hit the ball, and I learned a lot from there. The rest of it, I never could reference 6B3 versus 31C. You know, but to me, if I knew how the club hit the ball to make it go somewhere, and the rest of the book, I did learn some stuff. Don't get me wrong, and what he had right was amazing. So they talked about a flat left wrist. So in the golfing machine, if this wrist is extended like this at address, and it never changes per the golf machine, that's a flat left wrist because it never changes. It doesn't have to be flat with the forearm. Okay, so that's a flat left wrist. So 2006, Greg Rose and Dave Phillips invited the 6 of us to TPI for 2 days in 2006, and it was a watershed moment for me. And we're all sitting in this room, and we had one of the guys who was in our group who we thought could be a hitter and a swinger. So we put him on 3D wires, the old AMM wired system, Cohemus, and they measured him hitting and swinging. And then we went in the conference room and we started looking at the stuff. And Greg and Dave had all the camps in there. They had the stack and tilt guys, I think, the 1 plane, 2 plane guys, different times, not the same time. They were just learning themselves and basically saying, hey, we're able to measure what all these camps can do or we're trying to do. And we're telling them what we're seeing. So we're sitting in the room, and the not first thing, but about 20 minutes in, Greg Rose says, is deceleration good in the downswing? Now, if I'd have asked you that in 1980, you'd have said emphatically no. Right? Would you have not? We
Yes.
all would. We all would, And I said, I tell him, I go, no. And he says, that's not right. And I said, really? Can you show me? And he showed me my first kinematic sequence graph, pelvis rotation in degrees per second. Goes to the top, goes to 0, here we are. And halfway down, by the way, the pelvis is moving, it's faster, rotating about square on the downswing. And then it starts slowing down from there. I'm like, God darn, that's not what I'm teaching. And he started looking at all the other rotations and then realizing that without deceleration, you don't create any speed. Oh my God. So then the second thing, he brought up wrist graphs, flexion, extension, radial ulna, and supination, right? pronation, supination. My first wrist graphs I've ever saw. And then what I saw is when this tour players, by the way, this wasn't no hackers. What I saw is when that was coming down, the lead wrist was in flexion. Or it was, let's say it was flat at the top. Tour players, most of them, were moving towards flexion early in the downswing. And by the time they get 2/3 of the way down, this thing is in flexion, but moving towards extension. Not a single frame of a pitcher shooting a video. I mean, a frame advance. A frame advance shows you flat, but it's not telling you what it's doing.
Right.
It was moving towards extension.
Before
It
impact.
wasn't. It wasn't in extension and impact. It was moving towards extension. 2006. This happened. I went, oh my God, that's not what I'm teaching. I'm teaching a flat left wrist. And then nobody's doing it. I said, how much are one of those systems? And they said, well, a 12 sensor is 40,000 and a 8 sensor is 30. I bought one. Look, I didn't have that money sitting in a drawer, but I realized what I was teaching was not right because it wasn't what was happening amongst the best players in the world. So then I had 1,000 questions when I bought the 3D system, and a month later I had 2,000 questions. Okay? And I started to learn, and there was nobody to call. Wasn't going to bother Greg and those guys. In a way, they were somewhat in their infancy in that stuff too. Though they were way further along than most people. But I mean, the guys like Mike Adams and a lot of people had 3D back then to a certain extent. Not all of it good stuff, but some of it was really good. And they were learning these same things. We're all chasing the same thing. But I realized that that wasn't what was happening. So it's like, not only that, it was moving into extension 500, 600, 700 degrees per second. That's faster than most anybody's pelvis ever rotates. It was a fifth power accumulator, is what I said. Because if that was truly frozen, if you got in a car wreck and that was frozen, you wouldn't hit it anywhere.
Right.
So again, these are things that I measured and measured and measured and measured and measured and would sit back and go, what does this mean? When I bought force plates, I didn't know how to turn them on, much less be an expert. And the reason is I was waiting for dual force plates, not a single one. So a single force plate, if you stand up on a table and hit a golf shot and the table rotates, well, which foot made the table rotate? You just know the table rotated. Which foot did it? Well, how am I going to help you get better unless I know which foot did what? You got to make the table rotate more. Well, maybe let's talk about which foot has to do more. So those are some things that, and I know that some other camps, when they started getting on the measuring world, they started listening less and less to the folklore world. Because even what we found out that day, the guy hitting and swinging, 95% they were identical to the other graphs in certain aspects. So it was like, we think we're doing something totally different, and we're really not. And so I learned so much that day of where I wanted to go. And that was a watershed day for me on technology because I'd already had other stuff. But I mean, I bought that before I bought TrackMan, which was the next year. So I had full-blown 3D the year before I had TrackMan. So I was one of the few people in the world I know having research-grade 3D and TrackMan in 2006.
Wow.
And that's where I created my matrix of like, when you hit different shots, what's different? So
You are Q. You are Q. James Bond. You the gadget guy. You have all the latest technology. You know, you taught me about Kistler force plates having left and right, that we jump more off our front foot than we do off our trail foot. I think that was a good discovery there with that. But James, it's interesting with all this stuff. You've got Gears 3D now. You've got Kistler force plates. You got TrackMan. You got video. It's probably some other things you got there that you're measuring stuff with. But you take all that together, and now you got somebody showing up for an hour, 2 hour lesson. Uh, you're probably talking more about ball flight laws and trying to fix things with getting their path and club face better, aren't you?
absolutely, so One of the things too is here this year in gears. Michael Neff is a dear friend, and I was one of the first people to own gears. And we have taken they now we added two cameras. Now there's 10 3D cameras. Four of them are measuring the video of the golfer, and these six are measuring. Now we only put a hat with three markers, a belt with three markers, and mark the club, so we don't have to put the full suit on you. And we're still getting research grade measurements. That is huge. So we took the same golfer, very good golfer, bunches of them, measured them with the full suit with 32 markers on them, and then measured them with the AI version, hybrid version of gears, and coming up with the same numbers. Because people are trying to, measure it with a iPhone or whatever. It has its limitations. I'm not saying it's all bad information. Number one, I think there's a lot of good coming out of getting more people in the 3D space that don't want to go spend 40,000 or now more than that with 10 cameras like James Leitz. I get it. Not everybody's business model does that. Look, I'm in the lowest producing metro area in golf in the country, so I don't give anybody really any excuses there. You just got to either want to be better and learn, or you don't. It's about making money, go make money. That's fine. But if you truly want to be right as best you can, and I want to be right, and you're talking about all the information, I have a stent in my lower aorta. It's a stent that's this long and big around as a garden hose. The guy took an MRI of me. I met with him, and in 30 seconds, he told me he was going to cut my aorta in half and put this stent in and do it up and go down my legs and blah, blah, blah. He didn't show me my MRI. He didn't show me anything. You don't need to tell everybody every number of every technology. You as a teacher have to know who is confused by technology, who is addicted to technology, who needs to be convinced by technology, and who needs technology to measure differences of going from here to here. So it's a feel thing. You start using the numbers to really transcend feel. In other words, what's going to help a person feel the right thing? In the end, golf is played by feel that has a geometric system behind it. Not my quote, Homer Kelly's. Golf is a feel system, a trust system. When you don't trust your golf swing, you get up. I can promise you, if I had 3D hooked on you when you shot 65, and then we had it on every shot, and we got up to that one hole that you were shooting, you're 6 under, and you have water left and OB right, I promise you, you didn't unwind your body the same way on that hole that you did the rest. The brain dead, selfish people are way better at that than the people that are real. So when you're brain dead and selfish, you hit it on that hole like you did the rest. But those people like me, like, oh my God, we don't hit our best shots on holes we don't feel best just setting up to, because we change the way we move. And this whole system unwinds differently, and the end result is how the club's delivered. It's the end. You got proximal to distal. Well, nothing's more distal or further from the center than the club head. And it's the result of all the jump that precedes it, or quality. So that's kind of how I kind of have it in my head.
Right.
And how I'm going to take that person in front of me, the way they move the golf club naturally, their way, and then try to put some geometric sense into it, because in the end, the ball only gives a damn about the geometry. It doesn't care how you can or can't move, but we got to use that. We know that. But
Right.
the golf ball don't care. I couldn't be 45 degrees open with my pelvis if you put a gun to my head. Okay? So,
Your upper core.
Yeah, exactly. So I couldn't do it. I didn't realize it until literally 4 years ago. I'm sitting there. We have some property, my parents' property. Before I was 13 years old, I guarantee I chopped 150 trees down with an axe. And I don't mean little trees. And cut them up in pieces and brought them to a fire. This is 10, 11, 12, 13, 14-year-old. So what do you think? And that's before I ever played golf. What do you think programmed my hitting? Freaking axe. Do you think I was a spinner? And then you go get a kid born today who's been in a batting cage, whose daddy's got him in a batting cage forever, he's a spinner. He hit 200 baseballs a day, twice a week. So he's learning to move that way. And here's James chopping trees down for Jim and Lacombe. When they put a golf club in their hands, they're going to be different.
Yeah. And there's different ways to do it. And that's what we got to figure out as instructors. And I also think that's why Right Balance is so great, because we have 3 different swing models that pretty much everybody fits into: upper, mid, and low core models. Mid core is your tour model. But it's just once we figure out what model they are, we know how to coach them. And James, I really think it's important that we educate our students, because I want them to understand what the ball is telling them. The ball always gives us clues as to what happened at impact. So I want them getting smarter about, okay, what's the ball telling me happened at impact? And then maybe I can change something to get my path or club face or impact point better, or my angle of attack better, so that I hit my desired shot. And I think that's huge in teaching.
Well, we measured now. It's so easy with gears. I literally am using gears on 90% of my lessons. I put a belt on them, a hat on them, give them a club that's marked with 3D, and we're rolling. And even though it's 9,000 degrees, the other suit was so hard I couldn't put it on from May till October. Okay, and so I didn't use it as much. I've used my 3D more in the last 3 months than I did in the last 10 years.
Wow.
So because everybody's on it, I don't tell everybody what they're doing. But I'm going in there and finding my clues. I'm getting my strategy of where I'm going with that particular golfer. And yes, I could see a guy who can't rotate. You know, we all know a couple of things for sure with the ball flight laws. When the ball's on the ground, we have to hit the ball first and then the turf. We all got to agree on that.
Yeah.
We all should agree that the ball should hit about the 4th or 5th groove. Yeah. Can't hit on the first groove, 2nd groove, or 8th groove. The club doesn't perform very well there. About the 5th groove. Well, if you put a ball up against the club face on the 5th groove, the bottom of the sole is below the bottom of the ball. So that means for the club to produce, the bottom of the sole needs to be below the bottom of the ball. How we're going to hit
Why
up
we
on the
take a
ground and
divot.
do that? Huh?
That's why we take a divot.
Right. How are we going to hit up and do that? Can't. So when a guy's got an
No.
up angle of attack with a 7-iron, he can never hit a solid shot.
No.
That's on a tee. Number 2, can he come in level and hit the 5th groove? No. So you have to fit it in there. It has to be moving down to only hit very little, barely hit any grass, hit the 5th groove, and then go into the turf. Okay? So there's some guys like I'd watch Tiger, when I was working around with Foley, we'd watch Tiger hit 30 balls with a 7-iron, an area this big, and never get into the soil. But he was taking a little crispy little divot every time. And, he was maybe on the 4th groove. And obviously these guys that are great wedge players have found ways to hit it even low on the face, which creates more spin. But boy, don't tell average Mr. Haverkamp that's what he needs to do. It's kind of unsafe. So anyway, so to do that, if a person is a upper core non-rotating person, we have to locate them further forward.
Right.
Whether it be at address, whether it be not going back, but at impact, if they're throwing it away, you can't be over here and throw it away and hit the ground after the ball. You can't give that golfer. Suppose you measure his ground reaction forces and say, hey, you're a 2-legged jumper. Mr. Throwaway. We're going to get you more on your lead side, pushing your left side harder, because that's the way it's supposed to be done. He's going to get worse. If you don't geometrically reposition him, then kick in the lead side verticals. So if I'm standing here with my legs flexed, and I push only into the ground with my left leg, my head goes this way, right?
Yeah.
That's what happens in the golf swing. So if you've got a person whose head already is too far behind the ball and you give them more lead verticals, he gets worse. So it's like you got to be careful. You don't max these things out just because you want them maxed out.
Right.
You got to do what's right for that given golfer based on his grip type, his throwaway, non-throwaway. To me, I mean, I'm not a physiological person per se. I should have gone down that rabbit hole more than I do, but I definitely have preferences. They're not laws. They're my James's preferences of where this person's located side to side based on their throwaway, not throwaway, because you got to hit the ground after the ball.
Right.
And then the same thing too. If you get a guy who's outside in, behind the ball, hitting it fat, and you go fix his path first and get him inside out off the ground, you're going to make him worse
Right.
because he can't bottom out in front of the ball when he's over the top. How in the hell is he
Right.
going to bottom out in front of the ball if he's coming from the inside? It makes it worse. So you have to go address him getting more forward. So one of
Right.
the big things I talk about is managing the grapes. You got a grape in the upper neck between the two AC joints, and you got a grape in the middle of your pelvis. That's the upper grape, the grapes. I'm an expert on that because I learned that in '06 on. Where these are located in space in relation to each other have a lot to do with where you bottom out based on your grip type and lag. Then you start path, face, and impact point on top of that. But the first thing you got to do is hit the ball and then the ground. Got to do that first.
Yeah.
And you can't do it with all those other places, all those other problems.
Well, James, it's been great having you on the show. If people want to go see James, you can see him at the Chafuncta Country Club outside of New Orleans. They're in Louisiana. You can get some gumbo while you're there too. James, always fun to catch up with you, my friend. I got to watch your show again because you said so many things that I just learned a lot. So always appreciate you, my friend.
Well, I think we're both very, very lucky people. We're both faith-based people. We realize and are grateful every day to do what we do. The people that get to play this great game should be also very grateful. I was a little disappointed in the way this Ryder Cup was this week. I told somebody this week, I said, I miss the formality of golf when I started playing. You could play at the worst golf course in America, and there was a decor and a formality when we were kids, how you acted.
Right.
And when I see the way both players and spectators acted, it just tinges a little part of my heart because we can't sit there and tell your parents, come to this great game because it's impeccable and act the way we acted. So I hope that everybody learns from this week, and you and I and all those of us, because I do believe even the people that acted poorly love this game and let's respect it.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
All right, James. You've been listening to the Larry Rinker Golf Podcast. Till next time, keep swinging.